Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We're in the kitchen again, but we're not making bread. We're going to deviate from that just a little bit, and instead of making bread, we're actually going to make cookies. Because somebody asked me if I had a good recipe for chocolate chip cookies, and indeed I do. Chocolate chip cookies are a classic, and everyone should have a good recipe for them. These ones are chewy and delicious. I don't really like crisp chocolate chip cookies. When I bite into a chocolate chip cookie, it should be very chewy and melt in your mouth. That's what these ones do. This is not an oatmeal recipe. There's no oatmeal in this one. I do have an oatmeal one, but this is my personal favorite chocolate chip recipe. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to need is half a cup of butter or margarine. Just half a cup. It doesn't really matter if you use butter or margarine. You can use either one. This recipe is very forgiving. Most of the flavor is from the sugars and the chocolate chips, so it's okay to use margarine if that's what you have. To that, we are going to add a third of a cup of firmly packed brown sugar. You do want it firmly packed. When you measure brown sugar, it should always be packed nice and firm. Then we're going to want a third of a cup of just plain white sugar. Okay, now that we have those in there, we are going to use an electric mixer to cream the butter and the sugars together. You do want to use an electric mixer. I'm using a hand mixer. You can use a stand mixer if you like. I prefer a hand mixer because I'm going to switch away from the hand mixer after we cream everything together, and I'm going to use a wooden spoon. So push your mixer down into the sugar, turn it on low. I'm probably going to turn the volume way down on the video just so you don't have to listen to the sound of my mixer. Okay, so you notice that I increased speed there. You should do that. Start off at a low speed and then increase your speed just because you don't want to fling all your ingredients right in your face. Use a lower speed to start and then increase it until you have this creamy texture. So you should have a fairly creamy mix just like that. Now to that, we're going to add a splash of vanilla. About a teaspoon is good. You can do a little bit more than that if you like, but I'm only doing about a teaspoon. I don't want it overwhelmingly vanilla. Just a little bit of vanilla extract. Then I'm going to take an egg, crack it. I did it. Cracking eggs is something of a trial for me sometimes, so I'm always happy when I manage it. So we have our vanilla and our egg. We're just going to cream that into there too. So again, I'll turn the volume down. There we go. You should have something that looks about like that now. It actually looks fantastic. I'm going to switch to a wooden spoon from here on out. I find it easier, and sometimes I even mix with my hands. I don't like using a mixer if I'm going to be adding chocolate chips, simply because what happens then is my chocolate chips get beat up. That's the oven telling me it's ready. We are going to preheat our oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll mention that again, but I just mentioned it now because the oven's telling me it's heated. So to this, put in 1 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Don't try to use whole wheat or anything. It doesn't really turn out. Then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of baking soda, not baking powder, baking soda. And then we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Why salt, do you ask? You have to add salt. Salt balances your flavors and it actually brings out the flavor of the other ingredients. So you're not going to taste the salt as a salt. What you're going to do is you're going to notice that your flavors are elevated. If you leave out that little bit of salt, your cookies are just going to be flat in one note. You want something that's a little bit bright, a little bit fun. So you don't want a flat one note cookie. Add the salt. So we're just going to mix that up. And I'm going to switch to my hands in a minute because I really do prefer hand mixing cookies just because they do need it. They mix better if you get your hands in there and actually muck around with the dough. So we're looking about like that. That's looking pretty good. But now I'm going to take my ring off. Don't do this if you have a ring on. Take your ring off. So just get the dough off your spoon and get your hand right in there. Just want to really just mix that around. You want it to be sticky. This dough won't be super stiff. Okay, you want it to be nice and sticky. So it should stick to your hands. If it's not sticking to your hands, you have too much flour. It should stick. There we go. And when it's mostly incorporated, about like that, we're going to add our chocolate chips. How many do you ask? Doesn't matter. You can do anywhere from 1/4 cup to 2 cups. So 1 cup is probably the norm. That's what I just added. But you can add way more or way less. It depends on what you like. So measure chocolate chips with your heart. That's what my grands used to say. You don't measure chocolate with a measuring cup. You do it with your heart. So if you like that amount of chocolate chips in your dough, that's how many you add. That's just the way it is. Chocolate chips don't need a measuring cup. This is something you do with your heart. You can also add other ingredients. So if you would like to add a walnut, goes really nice in this recipe. If you don't like chocolate, which I don't understand, but not everybody likes chocolate. But if you don't like chocolate, you can always switch it up and you could add carob, which I don't, but some people really like carob. So you could do a carob. You could do a walnut, an almond. You could do almost anything. This is a really versatile recipe. You could do cranberries if you wanted. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do the chocolate, but you could change it. That's fine. All right, so we're looking pretty good. We're just going to take some of the excess dough off my hands. I don't care that I have dough in my hands. It's not that big a deal. Move that out of the way. Now we're going to get our pan. We need our pan. Yes, we do. You want some kind of liner on your pan. Don't put them directly on your cookie sheet. I'm using my copper liner like I usually do. You can use parchment paper. Do not use foil and do not use wax paper. Foil will stick. Okay, wax paper lights on fire. So no wax paper, no foil. Parchment paper or some kind of liner. You can get silicone liners, you can get copper liners, any kind of liner you like. Next up, I'm using this scoop. This has a tablespoon side and a teaspoon side. I'm going to do big cookies. I don't want little cookies. So big cookies, fill my scoop, tablespoon. You want about a tablespoon of dough. Roll that into a nice ball. Pop that on your sheet there. Do not squish them. You don't want to squish your cookies. Just leave them in a ball. You don't need to squish these ones. They will go and spread on their own. So keep them a couple inches apart because they will spread, like I said. They absolutely will spread. Go. And so you want them a decent space apart. Here we go. You do not need to refrigerate this dough before you use it. Now, some doughs you do need to. So if a recipe tells you to refrigerate a dough for an hour before you use that dough, then you absolutely should do that. Absolutely. There we go. I'm going to end up with 12 cookies on this. I'm doing pretty big cookies. I like big cookies. Why would we do little cookies? I like big ones. So we're going to get about 12 cookies on this sheet. This recipe makes 16 to 18 cookies, so I won't be able to get all my dough on here at once. That's okay. I'll do a second batch off camera. So we're just going to do 12. Remember, don't crowd them. Crowding your cookies is a mistake. Crowding your cookies will result in cookies that just squish everywhere and touch each other. And we don't like cookies touching each other. Yeah, cookies shouldn't touch. Not this kind of cookie anyway. There we go. There we are. That's too much dough in that one. So we're just going to get 12 cookies here, and then we'll come back and make about 6 more. I'll do that off camera. You don't need to watch me do this twice because that's boring. So we are going to bake these now at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. That aside, we're going to do that for about 9 minutes. Now, if you wanted to do smaller cookies, you could drop them by teaspoonful instead of tablespoon. You would bake those for 7 minutes. But we are going to bake these ones for 9 because these are actually going to be nice big cookies. I love these cookies and I love them big. So we're going to pop them in the oven, and then we'll come back in 9 minutes and take a look. All right, our cookies just came out of the oven. They did actually cook for about 10.5 minutes. You want to check them at 9 minutes, but you want to be prepared for them to cook as long as 12 minutes because baking is as much an art as it is a science. So you want to make sure you give them enough time. They should just turn brown. You don't want them very brown because very brown will mean a tougher cookie. All right, a cookie that has a little less fluff, a little less chew to it. And I like a chewy chocolate chip cookie. You could bake them a minute longer and they would be less chewy. You do want to let them sit on the pan for about 2 minutes. Set a timer. I'm guessing how long they're going to be sitting. And I'm not going to leave them the full 2 minutes because I never do. But you should let them sit the full 2 minutes. For taking them off, you want to use a metal spatula that has a thin edge. This is the easiest for removing cookies from a pan. If you use a silicone or plastic spatula, what often happens is you end up ripping your cookie because it's too thick. So this is a very thin spatula. Actually, this spatula is about 45 years old. I stole it from my mother. Yeah. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. So use a thin edge spatula. Take them off the sheet. You don't want to leave them too long because if you leave them longer than about 2 minutes, what happens is they start to get hard. So we're just going to take them here, pop them on the cooling rack. You do want to use a wire rack for cooling them because you don't want them to get soggy. You want them soft and chewy, but you don't want soggy. Soggy's not good for anyone. So we're just going to take these, put them here, move that over there to cool. Now you're going to let these cool, not completely. You're going to let them cool till they're almost completely cooled. Then you're going to store them in an airtight container for up to 5 days before they start to not taste quite as fresh. We don't make it that long. I promise you, we're going to eat this entire batch of cookies today. We have a household of 5. They're all going to get eaten. But if you do need to store them, up to 5 days. They also freeze really well. Make sure they're completely cool before you freeze them. So put them in an airtight container to fully cool. So these will sit for about 10 minutes on this cooling rack. Then they're going to go into an airtight container. And then if I did need to freeze them, when they were fully cooled, I would wrap them and freeze them in my deep freeze. I don't freeze them in my freezer in my kitchen. I use the deep freeze in the basement. So they should be about that dark on the bottom. Right? You don't want them super dark. Just like that. They are very hot. And you want the tops to crack a little bit, but you don't want them to completely split. If they've completely split, you've overcooked them. So we're just going to let these sit and they'll cool and then we will eat them up because they never get stored around here. I hope you've enjoyed baking chocolate chip cookies with us today. Hopefully you'll give this recipe a try. It is one of my favorites and they are very delicious. So hopefully you enjoyed this video and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.